Hey guys, John here. Today we're in Arturia Pigments 4, and to continue off the resonance types of patches this week, we're actually going to be using resonance on the EQ section in the effects section instead of the filter resonance. So with that being said, we have the sequence called Blood Formant using the compressor from Hive called Presswerk, and I kind of made a similar patch with the repro, but I wanted to see how it functions in Pigments, and it's actually pretty cool. So this is what we're going to be making today. Okay, so let's get started here. So first thing, let's go to the channel that we're going to be making this on. It's disable our compressor for now, so it's basically just going to be this here. Okay, so let's go ahead and disable the effects for now and the sequencer. So we have something kind of like that. Much less inspiring. Okay, so for now, let's close out the compressor and let's bring this pigments a little bit over here and kind of rebuild this thing. So what we're going to be doing is let's go to, and I think we did a default, right? Just in case. Okay, so the first engine is going to be analog. So let's go to the analog engine. And if we look over here, we're going to be using a saw wave, and then we're going to be using another square, and then another sine wave. And I'll kind of explain these here as well. So the first one's going to be saw and 100% in the mix, so we don't really have to change anything there. Then we're going to be going to a square, and that's going to be dropped down to 1 octave. And we're going to bring it in the mix as well at a value of 100%, so 0 dB. We have something like that. And then we have a sine wave up 1 octave. Now, this one was kind of just added to add a little extra tone at the top. So let's bring this up 1 octave, something like that. It's going to be a sine wave. And it's not going to be fully in the mix. This is kind of just where it stops. So negative 7.03. So something like that there. Now we're going to be using some detune or some unison at 3 voices. I think our detune is going to be the same at 1.5, and then we're going to bring down the stereo field to 62.8. Because we don't want it too wide, right? Okay, so. Okay, now we need to take a look at our envelopes here because that's going to be kind of important. So our attack is going to be 1, which is default, decay 522. So decay is going to be 522 for this guy, 522. No sustain whatsoever. And then for our release is going to be, so this is going to be interesting. So our release is going to be 5 by default, right? So it pretty much ends instantly. However, what we're doing is on macro 3, this is going to be, if you see here, it's going to be on a gate. So we have longer. So once we turn on our sequence, check this out. So we have a nice kind of just a gate control, which I thought was actually pretty cool. So what we're going to be doing is this modulation amount is going to be 0.29. So all we need to do, I think it's on 3. Yeah, so macro 3, drag and drop this onto the release at, I forget these values every second, 0.29. Okay, so 0.29, something like that. And for now, let's double click this and label this gate like we did before. Let's leave these on the same, so 0.364 for now. And then turn off our sequencer. So we're getting pretty close here. So now we're going to be using the MS20 for our filter. So let's go to the MS20. And our main cutoff value is going to be 53.4. So pretty low, 53.4. And okay. Now these two are going to be on macros as well. So our cutoff macro amount is 0.42. So let's drag and drop this here. And then 0.42, something like that. And where are we here on our macro? So we're at about 0.856. Right here, and let's double click and label this cutoff. CUTOFF. There we go. Okay. And we also have some modulation for the second envelope. So let's kind of take a look at that guy. So we can drag and drop envelope 2 onto the cutoff, and our modulation amount is going to be 0.33. So 0.33, something like this here. And we have our attack at 1, which is default for the decay, no sustain, which I believe is default as well. And then what is our release is 100, which probably is default as well. So yeah, we don't have to touch the envelope per se. The decay, -2, yeah, that's default as well, I believe. Yep. Okay, so pretty much drag and drop on the envelope. Now we need to add the resonance on a macro, and it's going to be at 0.60. So the second macro, drag and drop this to 0.60, so 0.60. And then our resonance amounts for a macro is 0.884. So yeah, 0.884, something like that. There we go. Okay, so one thing that we did miss is going to be this curve for our envelope VCA. So the decay curve is -1.12. So let's go ahead and change that back to -1.12. Okay, so next thing before we move on here is going to be this randomization on the filter, which I think is pretty cool. Something we did in the last video. So this is going to be using random 1 at 0.34. So we can just drag and drop this real quick at 0.34. Now we hop into the random and change this from Turing to sample and whole as we did over here. And we're going to be sampled from the white noise and poly keyboard. And what's also cool as well is instead of the values just snapping so much, so I linked these two here and then brought the rise up by 91, which brings up the fall by the same amount. So you have something kind of similar like that, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's double check some things here, make sure we're all good. I think we are. So one thing we need to add as well is going to be this noise, and this really helps out with the sequence, right? So we're going to be using this white noise at -12.2. And you'll see why a little bit later, but it's definitely helpful to keep the rhythmic value of that of the sequence. Okay, so our volumes are a little bit different here. So this one right here is -19.2. So let's bring this down to -19.2. So we're kind of... Okay, we're pretty close here. We're pretty exact. Okay. I think we're all right for now. So now let's go to the effects and let's take a look at what's going on here. So this is kind of where a lot of that magic happens. So FXB, we're going to be disabling this for now and then looking at FXA. So basically what's going on here. So this is really weird, right? We have that sound. So we're kind of creating our own formants, right? Because the formants are these resonance peaks a lot of the times in the filters at different spots and at different amplitudes, and basically creates that formant vocal sound. So here we're kind of making our own in that sense, and it's a lot of tweaking these knobs to get the sound that you really want. So basically here's what I did. So the first one is going to be the EQ and this low shelf. I don't even think we're going to be touching that, so that's fine. We're really going to be only using these 1, 2, and 3 bands. So the first one is going to be at 963 hertz on the first one. 963. Where are you? We're close. Jesus Christ. 963. And these values do matter pretty closely, right? If we're doing these kind of tonality effects. And the gain is going to be 5.40. Now this guy, and then the Q is going to be 2.43. Okay. So the whole reason for this guy is this first one is kind of like a support for the other two. Because if we look on here, we can see that these other two, so 2 and 3, are kind of moving towards each other. And it's kind of clashing into that first one in the center. And that center is kind of a little bit more support of that sound. So take a look at number 2 here. So this 2 is going to be at 824. So number 2 is going to be at 824, right? Yeah, 824. 824. And then the resonance is going to be 2.24. Something like that. And then the gain is going to be at 10.3. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to get these filters to move, or these knobs to move, and we're going to be using a function for that. So this function here is basically not much we have to change here. So if we go to the function tab, what I did here is change this to an envelope. but we don't want the sustain up here at the top because that's kind of pointless. So we can like double click down here and then make the sustain point there. So if you didn't know, you can always double click an existing point and it will change that to the sustain. And then I kind of just change this curve a little bit to be a little bit more concave, something kind of like that. And then we're going to have to mess with the rate so we can go in hertz because it's a little easier to work that way. So this is going to be 7.07. So something like that. Now we need to map this here. So this is going to be at -20 modulation for function 1. So -20 right over here. So -20. We're starting to get that sound, right? Wow, wow, I guess. Okay, so now on 3, we're kind of going to be doing the same thing, but just a little slightly different value. So frequency is going to be 1063, 1063. And like I said before, these values are very finicky, right? To get the right amount of the right spot where you want the frequency, how much modulation, how much gain is going to be on these bands. So the gain is going to be 11.5. 11.5, and then the Q is very important as well. So 2.58. And now to modulate this, because it doesn't really work without the modulation, so we're going to be a value of 0.25, so positive 25 for this guy. So on the frequency, positive 0.25. Okay, so now something interesting to explain. So both of these modulations are going to be on this function, right? So depending on the speed and the curve of this function, it's going to change that sound. So with these kind of sounds, there's a lot of different key interests that really kind of make the sound what it is, right? The bands on the bands on the EQ, the gain, how much modulation there is, the Q, and how fast this modulation goes, and the modulation itself with this curve. So those are the kind of things you really want to pay attention to. And it's a lot of trial and error to get it to sound how you want it to sound, right? So next up is going to be distortion. And I thought the wave folder was kind of cool for this patch here. So we're going to go to distortion, and let's go over to the wave folder, this guy here. And our type's going to be a triangle. Let's change to a triangle, and then what do we have here? So our drive, 21.5. Then our dry wet is going to be on a macro at 36. So this is macro 4. So we're going to be using the effects. So I guess we can do that now. So bring this down, macro 4, we can drag and drop, and our value is going to be at 36. So 0.36. And then we can turn this up all the way and label this as effects. Okay, so we're pretty close. So one thing, when I was making this, I felt like I needed a little bit more of the top end. So we have another EQ to kind of correct for that. So let's go for another EQ. And really the only thing is changing is going to be this high shelf here. So we're going to be at 3,631, 3,600, that's fine, 52, whatever. Okay, and then the gain is going to be at about 3.23. It's pretty close. Okay, so now the other effects are kind of just creating the sound of the like spatial stuff and delays. So we have a delay and then into a reverb. So let's go to a delay. And this guy looks like a dotted eighth note and some dotted eighth note, ping pong, and some filtering here. So we have 142, 3891. 142, that looks fine. And then our dry wet here is going to be at 20. So what we can do here is bring this all the way down and use our macro, drag and drop this here at 0.20. I believe that's what we did, right? Yeah, okay. Last but not least for the effects is going to be reverb. So let's go ahead and add the reverb here. And what do we have? So basically 0.26 for our modulation. So we can bring this down, drag and drop, and go to 0.26. So pre-delay is going to be 15, the default's 20, so we need to bring this down here, and then bring down the size, 0.82. And the decay is going to be 382. A little smaller. And that looks like pretty much most of it, yeah. Now this guy is going to be a sequence, right? So if we turn the sequencer on, there's going to be some interesting stuff going on here as well. So let's go to the sequencer page and kind of see what's happening. So let's turn this on. We're on sequencer, and the scale is going to be the natural minor. I mean, you can pick whichever ones you'd like. And we're going to be going to 16 steps. So we can drag and drop this guy all the way to the right. And we're also using polyrhythm, so turn that on as well. The rate at 1/16 is fine. But the regen, we want to go 1/4. So if you don't know what the regen is, anytime we add randomness, it's basically a set amount of time for those values to be re-randomized, okay? So with that being said, this is basically the sequence that I did. It's not crazy. A lot of these types of sequences, you really don't have to do too many crazy note changes. It's kind of more, I think, about rhythm and more about like the gate lengths and slides and kind of stuff like that. So let's go ahead and copy this here. So step 3 is going to be a D sharp. So step 3 is going to be a D sharp. And then step 11 is going to be D. So step 11, change that up to a D. Okay, so now we have too many notes here. So what I like to sometimes do is take things away. So on this trig probability, we can take away steps 2, 4, and 8. So trig probability, steps 2, and then steps 4. Take that one as well. And then step 8, let's take that down as well. And then what else do we have? We have steps 10, 13, and 16. So trig probability, 10, 13, and did I say 16? Yes, and 16. So now we have kind of a rhythm like this. Let's bring that back up. Right, and if we disable what we have here and just play our patch now with a kick. So this is an interesting spot where taking notes away kind of adds more to this patch. So next up, we're going to be doing some randomness, right? So the gate length, we're doing a randomization value of 13.2. So 13.2, there we go. Or 0.6, that's fine. And I love doing a little bit of gate length modulation, or the randomness, right, of the auto regen, because it keeps it fresh, right? So our brains can really easily know if each note is the same length every single time. So adding a little bit of randomness kind of helps keep it fresh, I guess. So now for our slide here. Now this one is really cool, but you have to use it sparingly. So 14.4%. That's even kind of a lot, but I wouldn't really push it too much after that. So maybe 14%. Okay, so now with that being said, we're doing a little bit interesting stuff with our octaves. I think what happened originally is on the polyrhythm, I kind of kept going back and forth of saying like maybe every other octave should be up, and I kind of just brought it down to the 16 steps. So technically the polyrhythms don't really matter because we're using all 16 steps for everything, but thought I would just mention that. So anyway, on our octaves, we're going to be going step 3, 7, and 11. So octaves 3, go up 1 octave, 7 up 1 octave, and then 11 we're going up 1 octave as well. And I think there's another one to 15. So 15, because it's kind of nice to have a little bit different octaves going on every so often. And with the drum beat, sounds pretty cool. And I believe that's all we have to do for the sequencer. And what's really nice, especially about Pigments, right, is that if we don't want this exact sequence, we can either make something new or just switch to the ARP, and we have all these settings that we did here that still apply. So yeah, that's a lot of fun as well. And keep in mind, we have different tonalities for the cutoff. Add some more resonance, which we should have labeled that as res, right? I don't think we did. I think we mapped that. Yeah, we did. And then our gate here, if we want to change the gate length. So definitely pretty cool. And then if we go back to our sequencer, And let's double check that we got everything. I don't think, oh yes, good thing that we looked at this. So this is kind of important as well, and this kind of gives a little bit more of the rhythmic feel. So remember how I said about the noise earlier? Gives a little bit more of that kind of rhythmic feel. So we're at negative 12.2. We're adding that sound. Okay, so we have that here in our main, right? Negative 12.2, that's cool. So we're kind of also going to be adding upon that here. So our utility engine, we're going to be using the sub kind of like how we do before, but it's not going to be in a macro this time. So if we turn this on, it's going to be direct out at 11.5. So turn this on, direct out at 11.5, something like that. We're close. There we go. And then next up, we're just going to be using this white noise, the default one. So we can turn this on, and this is going to filter one. The volume's 7.02, which I believe we had to bring this up a little bit, 7.02. There we go. And then we're going to be filtering this just a little bit here at 29% low pass. So there's that difference there, right? So we stop this here and we turn off our main engine. Gonna get those like swishy kind of sounds there. And then opening up that gate kind of gives us a little bit more of that formant that we've been adding there. But yeah, that's basically how you make this patch here. Hopefully you learn some of the concepts and kind of make something cool. Or if you want to get this patch specifically for free, there's a link in the video description below and it can be yours. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we will see you in the next video.